It's the Brownie Showdown to end all Brownie Showdowns. Last year we pinned Tasty's 2-Day Chocolate Chip Cookie against Claire Saffitz's 2-Day Chocolate Chip Cookie, which if you haven't seen that yet, you should definitely check it out. And you guys seem to enjoy that, so I decided to do the same thing with Tasty's Best Brownie Recipe and Claire's Forever Brownie Recipe. And to be clear, this is not Tasty's Best Fudgy Brownie Recipe, which is a separate recipe, but if there's interest for that, I can do that one as well. And for some more context, I have made this Tasty Brownie recipe many times before. Just like with the cookie video, I had made the Tasty recipe and hadn't made the Claire recipe. I think that's just a product of availability and Tasty being as big as it has been for so long, whereas Claire has been on her own channel not as long, and these recipes hadn't come out and just weren't as widely available for as long, so this wasn't a type of bias or anything like that. These are both basic brownie recipes, so they share a lot of similar ingredients and procedures, but some notable differences are that Claire uses a couple of, I'd say, non-traditional ingredients in her brownies, which are the malted milk powder as well as the milk chocolate mixed into the batter at the end. I personally was a fan of how she utilized milk as well as milk chocolate in her chocolate chip recipe, so I'm really interested to see how it works in this recipe. The procedures are pretty similar because it is just brownies, you're just mixing ingredients and baking, but Claire starts with a base of the melted chocolate and then adds the ingredients to that, whereas Tasty melts the chocolate on the side and adds it at the end once all the ingredients are mixed. Tasty emphasizes really whisking the eggs with a mechanical mixer until they're very fluffy. Claire mentions whisking the eggs thoroughly, but only does it by hand and not for nearly as long. Claire melts her chocolate gently over a double boiler, whereas Tasty just has you melt the chocolate using residual heat from melted butter, so I'm going to see if that makes a difference as well. A major difference that I already knew about before taste testing was that Tasty doesn't require you in the recipe to mix in chocolate chunks before baking. All of the chocolate is just melted at the beginning and mixed in that way. They do mention you can add chocolate chunks, but they don't include it in the recipe, so I don't consider that to be part of the recipe, while Claire makes a point for you to mix in the milk chocolate as chunks and not melted into the batter. In general, I personally need that in a brownie recipe. I need those textural differences in the chunks and pockets of chocolate as I'm biting through the brownie. So after the first time I made the Tasty recipe without them, I started to add them every single time afterwards because I thought they were necessary. And I'm going to cheat a little bit in today's verses by adding them to the Tasty recipe because I just can't eat it without them, but I will note that they're not part of the recipe, so I won't let them help Tasty in that regard. One more thing is that Claire requires you to chill the brownies for at least an hour before you cut into them and serve them, whereas Tasty says you can kind of serve them immediately. So I made Claire's recipe first so I could chill it while I was making Tasty's, and that they would come out kind of at the same time and be ready. I think it's time to taste test. I may have slightly underbaked Claire's brownie, but since when is that a bad thing? Yeah, vanilla milk. By the way, I'm not an edge brownie person by any means. I am middle brownie all the way. I don't understand how anybody couldn't be, but we'll save that for a different time. Oh. So I don't know what to expect. I have had the Tasty brownie probably a dozen times at this point, and I know what I'm going to get out of it, but I've never had Claire's, and I'm interested to see the differences that she has. They're similar to the differences that these two had between their chocolate chip cookies, so maybe there's going to be a similar difference there. But like before, I'm going to start with the Tasty brownie since I have tried it before. So you can see it's quite dense. It's going to be chewy on the inside, not fluffy and cakey, which is what I like in a brownie. Going in. That is familiarity right there. Me growing up eating boxed brownie mix, and then switching over to something like this was a great change for me, using the chopped chocolate and Dutch processed cocoa powder. Just easily much more advanced flavor profiles in this brownie. Nice and crisp on top and perfectly chewy in the middle, just what I want in a brownie. I love the flaky sea salt sprinkled on top. I always do this now on my baked goods like this because of seeing that from Tasty. But now on to Claire's. Like I said, it might be a little underbaked. There's a lot of doughy parts in the middle and it doesn't really come out completely, but I think the taste is still going to tell me what I need to know. So Claire's recipe has a lot of milk chocolate chunks mixed into the batter, not melted, after all the batter's been mixed, just so you have those little pockets of gooey chocolate, which I think is vital in a brownie recipe, which is why I always add chocolate chunks to the Tasty recipe. They recommend doing it, but it's not built into the recipe, so that is a knock on theirs. I automatically do it, and I had to do it here even though I'm supposed to be doing like a straight up test between the two. That gives the brownie a little heterogeneity, which I think is important when you're eating a dense dessert like this. But no more talking. Oh my. Okay, Claire, you've done it again and you've converted me to milk chocolate. She says in her video that there's a movement for everybody going for this really dark, really bitter chocolate in desserts, but that once she started experimenting with milk chocolate, she realized that she likes that a lot better, and I think I'm with her on that. It still has bitter chocolate in it and the bitterness of the cocoa powder, but those pockets of milk chocolate are perfect. I'm absolutely in love with this recipe already, and I think baking it a few more minutes would help just with the structure, but it tastes just fine. I hate to say it because Tasty's recipe has been a staple for me for a long time. I bring it to so many functions and people fall in love with this recipe, but Claire's just has to take the cake here. Now, I will say that Tasty's is built for a 9x13 pan, so you get more servings out of it. Claire's is only for an 8x8, so you're gonna get smaller brownies and less of them, which obviously you can multiply it and put it into a bigger pan, but the base recipe, Tasty, still does have more, which is better for some environments, but you sometimes don't wanna make so much because you have a smaller group and you don't wanna have so much to eat afterwards. But even with me adding the chocolate chunks into this Tasty recipe, I could have done more, but you know, the regular recipe doesn't have them. Even with that, I still prefer Claire's because it's milk chocolate and because it's sweeter and just feels better as you're eating it, in my opinion. Also, I'm gonna steal the flaky sea salt and put it on Claire's next time because I think that would be the perfect match. I'm not gonna say this is the last time I'll make Tasty's recipe. It's still amazing and I still love it and it's become nostalgic for me. But now that I have Claire's in my arsenal, it's gonna be hard not to choose this going forward. Some people knock Tasty for being kind of quantity over quality and kind of being all over the place, and their people don't focus on one thing, which I can agree with, but you know, they still have professionals that work on this stuff and their recipes are still good. There's some that are just made for entertainment, I get it. But having someone like Claire that's a dessert person that does this kind of stuff exclusively, it kind of shows here, and she's put more, seems like more effort into the recipe. So she gets to wear the crown once again. Thank you for this recipe, Claire. And if there's any other dessert recipes or other recipes that you want me to put head to head, let me know in the comments because I enjoy doing stuff like this, obviously. Otherwise, thank y'all for watching and I'll see you next time.